I was in the middle of preparing to attend the funeral of my beloved mother-in-law, who had recently passed away, when my phone suddenly rang. A voice commanded me, "Don't you dare come to the funeral. Go back to your parents' house in the countryside immediately." Confused but compliant, I immediately left for my childhood home in the rural Midwest. Later, my husband informed me about his estranged, troublesome sister, Daisy. "So mom's dead, huh? How much of the inheritance do I get?" Daisy's audacity in trying to profit from my mother-in-law's estate was unforgivable. I vowed to protect my mother-in-law's memory and fight against my ruthless sister-in-law. After a heated exchange, Daisy ended up in a cold, dark cell. "My name is Sarah, a typical housewife married to Stephen, who works for a company. We share a wonderfully happy life together." Many women struggle with their relationships with their husbands' families after marriage, particularly with their mothers-in-law, where rumors of secret and harsh conflicts often arise. Despite this, I had a different experience. I enjoyed a close relationship with my husband's mother, Donna. "Sarah, what do you think of this cardigan?" she once asked, presenting me with a hand-knitted sweater. "I made it with you in mind." "For me? Thank you. It's adorable, and your knitting skills are remarkable," I replied. "I'm glad you like it. With the weather turning chilly, take care not to catch a cold," Donna warned. "Of course. Could you teach me how to knit sometime?" I asked. Donna's smile was always warm and kind, and I was grateful for her support, even financially at times. I loved my gentle mother-in-law as if she were my own mother. But then my husband Stephen broke the news to me. "Sarah, mom passed away in the hospital." I was shocked by Donna's passing and struggled to eat for days. Yet, I knew I had to come to terms with reality. Donna had been diagnosed with terminal cancer a few years earlier and had been receiving chemotherapy treatments ever since. Her strength and resilience were remarkable, always greeting me with a smile whenever I visited. Donna had done her best to shield us from worry. I couldn't linger in sadness. I wanted to send my mother-in-law off with a smile. With that mindset, I was preparing to attend her funeral at my husband's family home. But then my husband's frantic voice rang out over the phone. "Wait, you need to head to your parents' house immediately. There's been a problem at the venue." "I'll explain everything when I see you," he said, sounding unusually flustered. I was bewildered by his words and the urgency in his voice. What kind of problem could he be talking about? I had never heard him so agitated before. "Okay, calm down. I'll do as you said and head to my parents' house. I'll take a cab. See you soon," I replied, and he hung up. Though my mind was full of questions, I trusted my husband's judgment and changed my plans. Instead of going to my husband's family home, I set out for my parents' house, feeling the pressure of the situation. When I arrived, my parents greeted me with concern. "Sarah, what's going on? Isn't today Donna's funeral?" "Come inside and we'll talk," they said. Like me, they seemed puzzled by the situation. We anxiously awaited my husband's arrival, uncertain about what had transpired. An hour later, he burst through the door. "Sarah, are you all right?" he asked, rushing to me. "I'm fine, but what happened to your hand?" I noticed his hand was wrapped in a bandage. He touched his injured hand, his face reflecting a mix of pain and frustration. Then he began to explain what had occurred at his parents' house. "Apparently, my husband has a sister named Daisy, 3 years his senior, who has caused trouble for the family since her youth. She had numerous encounters with the police over the years. Donna, my mother-in-law, never gave up on Daisy, constantly apologizing on her behalf and taking responsibility for the debts Daisy accrued. 'Mom, I'll pay it back, I promise,' Daisy had said. Donna believed her daughter, but Daisy broke her promise and left home. After that, she was cut off from my husband's family, and there had been no contact with her until today. Then Daisy unexpectedly appeared at her mother's funeral. Instead of showing remorse, she immediately asked, 'So mom's dead? How much of the inheritance do I get?' My husband was furious at her callous attitude. He told Daisy she had been disinherited a long time ago, and that Donna now considered me, Sarah, as her daughter. Daisy was incensed, he continued. She shouted, 'Who is Sarah? This is ridiculous. How can she inherit when the real daughter can't?' Daisy's face turned red with anger. She snatched my husband's phone and stormed out of the house, hurling hostile words at us. My husband was injured when she bit him in her rage. I quickly locked the phone remotely. But it seemed Daisy might have discovered our home address and seen photos of Sarah from my contact list. My mind was racing, unable to believe what I was hearing. It was shocking to learn that Donna had a daughter who had caused such trouble. I'm sorry for not telling you about my sister sooner. It's a complicated family matter, my husband apologized, a pained expression on his face. We discussed how to handle the situation, trying to reassure my distressed husband. We should probably avoid our city home for now, just to be safe, he said. Is the rural home address secure? Yes, I never stored that information on my phone, I reassured him. We decided to stay at our rural home for the time being, prioritizing safety. The following morning brought a sense of normalcy. The sun rose, and the birds chirping filled the air. I'm off to work. If anything happens, call me on my spare phone, okay? My husband said, giving me a reassuring smile as he left for work. I watched him drive away, outwardly smiling but inwardly anxious. What if Daisy showed up? What if she tried to harm me? These fears weighed on me constantly, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daisy's enraged face from that day at my husband's family home. Despite my worries, life in our rural home turned out to be peaceful. Day after day passed without incident, and a sense of calm began to replace the tension I had felt. I hoped the situation with my sister-in-law would simply fade away, but I knew it might not be that easy. I began to think more positively about the situation when things took a sudden turn. "Excuse me, are Stephen and Sarah at home?" a police officer from the local precinct asked as he approached our rural house. "What's this about?" I asked hesitantly, a sense of foreboding washing over me. It turned out my fears were well-founded. Our city home had been burglarized, and the police had just received a call from the scene. I immediately contacted my husband to tell him what happened, and we rushed back to our city home together. When we arrived, the sight that greeted us was one of utter chaos. The house had been ransacked, every drawer left open as though a storm had passed through. "Is anything missing?" the officer inquired. Prompted by his question, we began checking the interior of the house under the officer's supervision. Our bank books and other valuables appeared to be safe, but a few $100s that had been in our dresser were missing. Furthermore, a neighborhood investigation revealed that a suspicious woman had been seen loitering near our house multiple times over the past few days. Witnesses reported her shouting in front of our home, demanding, "Come out and pay me back, Stephen." I was almost certain the culprit was Daisy. My husband nodded in agreement, both of us thinking the same thing. We explained the recent issues with my sister-in-law to the police, including the disrupted funeral, the stolen smartphone, and my husband's injured hand. The police seemed to take our report seriously, possibly because we had already reported the smartphone incident to them. We then had to provide a more detailed account of events at the police station and didn't return to our rural home until nightfall. Soon after, the burglar was apprehended. As expected, it was my sister-in-law, Daisy. According to the police, she had the audacity to stay in a hotel near the crime scene after the burglary. She was supposedly taken into custody while casually receiving a massage from room service. Of course, she footed the bill with the money she had stolen from our house. Despite admitting to the crime, she vehemently denied the burglary. It was baffling to me. But when family dynamics were involved, things seemed far from straightforward. We were called back to the police station once more. Guided by the officer in charge, we entered the room where a sullen brunette woman sat, sulking in her chair. Suddenly, she erupted indignantly, "Stephen, how could you do something like this to your own family? It's unbelievable." Daisy showed no remorse whatsoever. In fact, she didn't even seem to acknowledge that she had done anything wrong. I imagine she behaved similarly during police interrogation. According to her, she hadn't intended to burglarize the house. She claimed she had come to discuss inheritance matters, but since we were always away, she had no choice but to break in. She justified stealing the money as necessary for her stay nearby. In other words, she shifted the blame onto us. It was alarming to think that such a dangerous person held a grudge against me. If I had encountered her alone, who knows what could have transpired. The mere thought sent shivers down my spine. Meanwhile, my husband Stephen and my sister-in-law were embroiled in a heated argument. "You've got some nerve showing up after all these years and pretending to be a part of the family." "Give me back my phone, will you?" Stephen demanded. Fine, I'll give it back. You locked it right away, so I couldn't even use it properly, just like you, huh?" Daisy retorted. Besides, family is family, isn't it? Both Mom and I cut ties with you a long time ago. That means you have no claim to her inheritance. Oh, how convenient, leaving all her money to a stranger's daughter instead of her own. Was the old hag out of her mind or what? Daisy continued, spewing disdainful remarks. Please stop saying such disgraceful things, I interjected, unable to stay silent any longer. I found myself shouting, unable to bear Daisy's disrespect toward Donna. Daisy, glaring at me with annoyance, shot back, You're that woman, right? The one who took the inheritance that should have been mine. No, I didn't take anything. What are you talking about? I replied, shocked by her accusation. But as Daisy advanced on me with an intense stare, I felt a pang of fear silencing me. Her penetrating gaze seemed to cut right through me, and she began to laugh as if she had claimed a victory. Just then, the police officer intervened with a gentle cough. Let's all calm down. It sounds like there's a lot to discuss here. Why don't you have a family meeting first? We can handle the matter of the charges and other details later, he said, taking control of the situation. Later, we arranged a formal discussion at our in-laws' home. Donna's relatives gathered around a large table in the living room, which was lined with carpets. Amidst the tense atmosphere, Daisy was the first to speak. If you give me my share of the inheritance, I'll overlook your past rudeness. You should be grateful for my generosity, she stated with her usual arrogance. Her attitude hadn't changed at all. After all, how could someone who'd been the same for over a decade change in just a few days? She kept insisting on the same demand. Give me the inheritance and drop the charges. Of course, we had no intention of giving in. We've told you repeatedly, you were disinherited. You can't receive any of Mom's inheritance, my husband stated firmly. Then why don't you share some of the money with me once you receive the inheritance? She asked, not giving up on her demands. That's not going to happen, my husband said, his frustration evident. I calmed my husband and turned to Daisy, making an effort to keep a level head. Daisy, did you read all of Donna's will? There was a section about you two, I said calmly. I'm only interested in the part about the inheritance. The rest is probably just her grievances against me. Daisy replied dismissively. But I couldn't let her misconceptions stand. Donna was concerned about you. She was filled with regret. I explained. Daisy scoffed in annoyance. Well then, she should have given me the inheritance, she retorted. My blood boiled, but beneath the anger, I felt overwhelmingly sad. Daisy saw her own mother, Donna, as nothing more than a means to an end. Donna didn't give you any money because she knew she couldn't change you with it, I said firmly, not waiting for her response. I can't let a despicable person like you have even a cent of Donna's money. Daisy faltered for a moment, her eyes narrowing sharply as she glared at me. It was an ugly and terrifying look, but this time, I refused to look away. There's nothing more to discuss. Please leave now, I said, locking eyes with Daisy. Suddenly, Daisy lunged across the table at me, driven by rage or fear. But before she could reach me, she was restrained by my husband and other family members who were present. 10 minutes later, she was forcefully escorted out by the police who had arrived at the scene. Despite her continued insults, by the time she was put into the patrol car, she had completely lost her spirit, slumping her shoulders. Afterwards, I heard that Daisy ended up in prison. Our report of the incident had been officially accepted. Apparently, Daisy had amassed a large amount of debt from loan sharks, and it seemed that her obsession with Donna's inheritance stemmed from this hidden circumstance. Regardless, she was expected to lead a miserable life, never to see the light of day again. She just didn't understand genuine love, and now she had to face the consequences of her actions. As we reflected on the recent events in our now neat and tidy home, my husband offered incense in front of my mother-in-law's portrait. I was surprised, Sarah, to see you argue so bravely, he remarked. That's because I read my mother-in-law's will again. I confessed. I hadn't really had the time to thoroughly go through it before. The will was filled with Donna's passionate feelings, almost like a letter. Every word she had written stirred me up. Donna had always been concerned about her child, never holding a grudge. She worried about her well-being and departed for heaven, bravely hoping for our happiness as a couple. She would have wanted to do many things for her real daughter. Holding my cardigan tight, I started to tear up, thinking about my mother-in-law. Seeing me like that, my husband tried to cheer me up. Sarah, would you knit something for me too? Sure, I'll show you mother-in-law's knitting technique, I said, wiping the tears from the corner of my eyes with a smile. We'll make good use of her inheritance from then on, I vowed, my heart determined to live a happy life for Donna's sake as well.